So now we are going to spend some time looking at function composition. This is probably the most challenging operation that we're going to do with functions. And how composition works, we are basically going to input one function into another. So it's going to look something like this. We'll see it as f of g of x, or you may see it more commonly as f of g of x. Both of those are saying the exact same thing. So what we would do is we're going to take one function. So in this case, we would start with the interior function and take g of x and plug it inside whatever function f of x is. So as I look here, here is our f of x function. Here is our g of x function. So this first one here, again, we're going to read this as f of g of x. So we're going to, so another way to think about this is g of x is 3x plus 5. So what we're doing is we're taking this value here, this 3x plus 5, and plugging it in anywhere we see an x in f. So what this does now, this turns into 3x plus 5 squared minus 1. So now we're going to simplify this and multiply this out. And when we do that, we get 9x squared plus 30x plus 25 minus 1. Again, that's from doing 3x plus 5 times 3x plus 5. And that's going to simplify to 9x squared plus 30x plus 24. And now we're going to switch it around. And we are going to do, for this next example, g of f of x. So in this case, we're going to take f of x, which is the function x squared minus 1, and we are going to plug it in to g. So we'll do 3 times x squared minus 1 plus 5, which will be 3x squared minus 3 plus 5, which is going to be 3x squared plus 2. For this last example, for this last part of this problem, f of g of 2, is we're going to take our f of g, which we just found right here, and we are going to plug in 2 for all of those values. So it'll be 9 times 2 squared plus 30 times 2 plus 24. And we go ahead and simplify that. So we'll get 36 plus 60 plus 24, which simplifies to 120. Next example, it is pretty much the exact same thing. So this first one, again, I always like to write it as f of g of x. I think that helps me remember what am I plugging into what. So in this case, I'm taking my g of x function, which in this case is root x. So it'll be the square root, oops, sorry, let me erase this. F of root x, which is going to be root x squared minus 16, which just ends up being x minus 16. And then it asks us for what our domain is here. So when we think about domain, here in this function, our domain is going to be 0, infinity. And over here, our domain is going to be negative infinity to infinity. So since we are taking this value, this is our input function, our domain of our final answer is going to be the most restrictive domain between these two in this case. So even though this resulting function is negative infinity to infinity, because of the function that we plugged in had a restriction on its domain, our final answer is going to have that exact same domain. Again, even though this function is negative infinity to infinity, we have to let this domain overrule us here in our final answer. So moving on to g of f of x, we're going to do g of f of x. we are going to take what f is, so it's going to be the square root of x squared minus 16. Again, taking the f function and plugging it into g. So that's our final answer for that composition. Now, for our domain here, we can't take the square root of a negative, so we need this to be true. And then when we look at our values, right, our zero values here are 4 and negative 4. So those become the two values that we check. Again, if I plug in negative 4, I get 0. If I plug in 4, I get 0. So I'm going to plug in numbers to check like we've done before. So plug in negative 5, plug in 0, and plug in positive 5. So when I plug in negative 5, I get a positive number. When I plug in something in between, I get a negative. And when I plug in positive 5, I get a positive answer. So the parts that make up my domain are these parts here, which is going to be, in this case, negative infinity to negative 4, bracket, union, bracket 4 to infinity. Again, the hardest part probably is thinking about your domains and trying to work your way through that. Okay, so go ahead and now move on to the next video.